Well, I suppose this time had to show up eventually. And by this time, I mean another episode of Pharmaceutical Soccer. Welcome back to your favorite Nashville SC podcast. A little bit of a downer of a start as the 15 match unbeaten streak has come to an end, and we are here to talk all about that. Clay Trainum, joined by Valair Shabilla. Stephen Robinson was so inspired by the Chelsea celebration, specifically by who was celebrating with Chelsea, that he's decided to take the day off from recording Pharma. And so just let me make sure that you tell Stephen that's the reason he's gone. And so he just doesn't like talking about losses, which is weird because he talks about losses all the time with Chelsea and Michigan football for that matter. So anyway, moving on from that, Valair.
Yeah.
Let's just we're gonna put off talking about the loss, and we're gonna do that by asking you how was your weekend.
Wow, what an intro! I think this is the first episode since the season started that Steven has missed, and it feels really weird to be saying that, considering he would miss like every other episode at one point of the show.
It's like the team starts winning, and then suddenly he feels like talking about it.
Exactly. It's like, oh, when there's a loss, Steven doesn't want to show. Interesting, am I right? No, I mean, it is a good weekend overall. Very good. Got to see some friends, and that's why there was no instant reaction video at the end of the game. I was a little preoccupied and couldn't fully carry on my coverage as usual on Saturday night, but that's okay. It was worth it. I was hanging out with a friend who's leaving town. So those very, very early days of the podcast, if you had ever heard the name Tipsy Tony, shout out Tipsy Tony. I think that was a thing for an episode like in 2019. So I don't know who all would know about that, but Clay and I would know about it, and that's really what matters.
I think he's gotten through. I think he's been referenced in at least 3 episodes.
Right. But the initial idea only happened for like an episode, if it ever happened. Honestly, I don't even know. But that said, other than that, pretty. I watched Superman on Sunday, and that caught me off guard because Superman is very boring to me, and that movie was not boring, and it was actually pretty exciting, and I enjoyed it. So, you know what? You can sue me, but from one immigrant to another, I really enjoyed Superman. And I didn't feel like the political discourse that was going on with it was as prominent during the movie as some folks would have you believe. It's a comic book movie. It's a superhero movie, and that's good enough for me.
I mean, this is where I try to avoid veering into my first job being at a comic book store, but all comic books are inherently political. Like, that's the whole thing.
It's also like very heavy, like military on pretty much all of them. You know what I mean? Like there are always countries fighting each other. Yeah, like it's you get it's not a possible thing to separate the two. It's not really.
Literally, the first Iron Man is nothing but about the military-industrial complex. But anyway, moving on. My weekend was not really about the military-industrial complex. It was more about the barbecued pork industrial complex, which, it was a good time. Watch some wrestling. I did not watch Superman, although I'm very excited to go watch it. I've heard a lot of good things. And, I went peach picking. So that was fun. I went and picked some peaches in Mount Juliet. And so we're going to be cooking even more food over the course of the week with the peaches.
Gotta let Timothy Chalamet know about your peach picking. Anyway,
that's
another movie callback.
I did play lots of peaches-related songs from 112, from the Presidents of the United States of the USA, and Jack Black, of course. So it was a very peaches-oriented playlist Sunday afternoon after we got home. And I think that's about as much as we can go without circling back to the reason that you're probably listening to this show, which is for a reaction to the first loss from Nashville since April. a 2-1 loss to Inter Miami. We're also going to talk about the U.S. Open Cup win over DC a little bit later in the show. Before we get started on that, the streak is dead. Long live the streak, right? So Nashville, when this streak started, we were pretty optimistic about where they were, and they'd be a playoff team. Maybe they could mess around and get into the mix for a home playoff game, but that seemed like a sort of off in the distance, pie in the sky type of thought. Now, 16 matches later, we're sitting there looking at Nashville, and they're still, loss aside, they're still very much in the mix for the Supporters Shield and look like one of the best teams in the league. That's how much can change in a couple months in MLS.
Yeah, I mean, the streak was always like a really fun, tangible thing to kind of point to show the progress that Nashville SC has done. But regardless of the streak, the progress was always there. From the moment they took the field, maybe not that New England game at home, maybe that one was still a bit raw, but you see the New England, you see the Red Bull games away, and then kind of from that third, fourth, fifth game, you really started seeing the progress, even if the results weren't there or the results weren't as good, obviously, as a 15-game unbeaten streak. But I think that, again, the streak was just a really nice thing to hold on to as a team, to say, look, finally, these results are, I think a couple of players described it, and maybe even BJ Callahan described it as like the output is matching the input. And that's always nice to point out too, right? It's like, it's a proof that you are doing the right thing and continuing to do. Now, if it doesn't happen and you get the odd loss here and there, that doesn't mean you're not doing the right thing. It just means that maybe you need to figure something else out, figure the opponent better, make better changes. Maybe Johnny Perez doesn't get a red card the game before, and maybe he plays and changes things. There are a lot of sort of elements that go into it. But for Nashville SC and especially for BJ Callahan, I think they're done. Like, they're not thinking about this right now. They're not. They would, at this point, they would have gone over it. They might talk about it a little bit here and there during the training sessions, but they got a game Wednesday and they got a game Saturday. And really, when you are becoming a well-oiled machine, the results don't really change a whole lot in what you do day to day, because that process is what got you the results to start with. And it's not a time to change the process right now. I mean, it's just one loss in 16 matches,
Well, and there's nothing to say that they don't just run off another 10 or 15 game unbeaten streak. Right. Like, if you look at the teams they played over the course of the last couple months, they've played some of the best teams in the league and gotten results out of it. And they're gonna have a few more. They're gonna play Miami again. They're gonna play Columbus this week. They've got games against San Diego. Like, they have every chance in the world of getting right back on top of it. And this is the part where it's like, we'll talk about the actual game, in the second segment, but it's one of those where it's like, oh, if Nashville would have beaten Miami, we'd be talking about first place Nashville right now, because other teams lost. It's set up very nicely for Nashville. But on the other hand, other teams lost, which means that everyone is still well within reach for Nashville. So, like, if you're going to lose, you may as well lose this game, because it hasn't massively changed the math. Like, Nashville is in the exact same place they were right now as they were last week this time. They're 2 points off first place. Nothing
you
changed.
Kept within the same busy schedule. You kept advancing in the Open Cup, which we've talked about how important it is, right? Like, it's important to look at this as a run of 3 games rather than this one isolated incident, because the players are looking at it that way, because the training staff is looking at it that way, because players' fatigue and players' energy and all that plays into it that way. And I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see more rotation onto Wednesday and Saturday, right? Because you can't look at one game when every 3 days you have a game coming up. And there are prioritization. You prioritize certain elements of it, and sometimes you demand more of your players, and sometimes you push them towards Hani Mukhtar playing 3 90-minute games in 8 days. That's a lot. That's a lot for a guy who who runs a lot too. He's covered like the 6th or 7th most ground in MLS in the entire league. That's not an easy thing for a what's supposed to be a creative sort of cherry on top player. He's a lot more than that, and that's just one example. I mean, Sam Surridge, Alex Muyl, whatever, like insert name there. That's not ideal. Maybe I think if it was up to them, they would probably have a weekly schedule where each game would be, they'll have 6 days to fix some things and kind of get ready and energized for the next game. But that's where we're at with MLS. And look, they had their most successful period when games were coming fast and quick. So they might just respond even better with it, all things considered.
Well, and that's the other like sort of fun aspect of this, because I've been trying to think about this. I brought it up on here before, but I've been trying to think about this the last few, and I don't know that we ever will. Has Nashville rolled out a first choice 11 this season?
Like, in terms of
I don't
best
know that
available,
one exists. I don't know that one that exists, but
right.
But I'm just like, because I'm thinking about it, because they've done this streak. Obviously, like Walker Zimmerman, is historically one of the best defenders in the league. Hasn't played the majority of this streak for various reasons, and you don't really know the answer to that question when it comes to the wingers, and so maybe playing fast and quick games when you have a lot of depth does give Nashville an advantage over other teams, at least depth in so much that you can have it in MLS. It's hard to have a ton of depth in MLS, but like when I was watching the game and seeing Schaffelberg start, like I was sitting there going like, have we seen a first choice 11 yet this season? Mm-hmm. Like in terms of like, other than what's available, like what is Nashville's first choice 11? I don't think any of us know the answer to that. And I just find it an interesting sort of wrinkle in this season.
And I think that's kind of another, it has its positives and negatives too, but that's another thing that's a byproduct of signing 12 players to the first team, is that we don't, a lot of these players we hadn't seen, definitely hadn't seen play for Nashville, but even some of them, Jason Palacios, for example, I hadn't seen Jason Palacios play. If you have, or anybody has who's listening to this podcast, please let me know if this kind of adds up with what he was beforehand, and even some players who we have seen play, like Andy Nahar, but we really weren't sure. I was super excited about the signing. You could probably tell from my previous tweets about Andy Nahar a few years back, but we still didn't know if he has it, if he still has it, if the health will be there. There were so many question marks, and that's why there wasn't like a defined Nashville SC starting lineup. And I think that's been the biggest strength for this team, is that under Gary Smith, to a specific extent, it was like very much a defined 11, and maybe 2 or 3 players that came in for those 11, and the rest of the squad will maybe see a few minutes here and there. Here, you're looking at maybe 12 to 14, maybe even 15 could be starters, right? And the rest of the squad is fighting to get into that 15 or so player pool, and I think that's really one of the hallmarks of a team that is developed, and a team and a squad that is full, a squad that isn't missing. It's not just BJ Callahan, what he's able to do, but also Mike Jacobs and what he's been able to recruit and build.
Yeah, we're gonna get to the game in just a second, but there was the MLS salary release here the other day, and is there better value than Andy Nahar's current contract with Nashville SC?
Yeah,
he's one of the lowest paid people on the whole team.
Yeah, I would be shocked if that's not revisited. I mean, I think Nashville knows, he knows, his agent and people know, and every fan knows that man's going to get paid more. I think he's deserved it.
They're paying Andy Nahar what, $800,000 less per year than they were paying Shaq Moore, right? Somewhere around there.
600,000 less, yes.
600,000 less. I'm sorry. I was factoring in transfer stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah,
little math, but yeah. I mean, still
Yeah.
insane amount of of
Yeah.
difference there.
They're
Your point is
paying.
very much valid.
Yeah, they're paying Shaq. They were paying Shaq more to Andy Nahar's more than they were paying.
Yeah.
So, either way. Anyway, enough about Andy Nahar. We're going to talk about him again here in just a few minutes, but we're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit about the Miami game. We're going to talk about the DC game, and we'll get right into the weeds about what's good, what's bad, and everything that's going on. You're listening to Pharmaceutical Soccer. Welcome back to Pharma Soccer. Clay Trainum once again joined by Valair Shabilla. Steven is in Loudon. I don't know where Steven is. I don't care.
I think he went to Chattanooga actually for their game
Good
coming up
job.
against Inter Miami because it's like two of his favorite teams, Inter Miami 2 and Chattanooga, and he loves the Miami brand. Like I've seen him wear jerseys, scarves, like it's crazy. He hides it when we're recording, but it's all over his room
Yeah,
actually because those are his two
yeah.
favorite American teams, and seeing the youth of Inter Miami really gets him like happy because he will see them for the first team eventually, and that
If you ever see Steven when he's off on those cruise ship tours, he's typically wearing a Blaze Matuidi Inter Miami
yes,
jersey.
yeah.
It,
He
it's
was
a
actually one of the few people who purchased the Cavani shirt based on a rumor.
oh
You
yeah,
remember that? That was a thing.
yeah. He actually thinks that Inter Miami wasn't cheating when they got busted for cheating. He thinks that
Yeah.
he thinks he needs to drain the swamp of the MLS headquarters. That's really like one of his go-to catchphrases. So that's why he's in DC. And so anyway, speaking of Inter Miami, let's talk about the game. Obviously a 2-1 loss for Nashville. Nashville gets messied. Nashville is messy and dealing with Messi and honestly that is the story of the game. I was just talking about this with somebody in the office earlier today, and it's like on one hand, if you go down to Miami, you play your best and you lose 2-1, you sit there and go, well, it is what it is. But if you go down to Miami and kind of give it away, which is essentially how it felt. It's exactly what Joe Willis did on the second goal. Then you're almost also relieved because you're like, oh, if this game were played again and Nashville's just a little bit less sloppy, they might be just as good as Miami, a team that's very much in the Shield race as well.
Yeah, I think people took some issue to my sort of final tweet or post saying that Miami were just the better team. And I didn't mean that in a way that like, oh, Miami, deserved the win or were the much, we're sort of way better than Nashville SC. I just meant that they took their chances first and foremost. And the second thing is that they kept Nashville pretty quiet for the most part. And maybe some of that was because Nashville weren't playing their best. I would agree with that. But that still had to do with Miami's structure and the way they handled the last, specifically, I'm talking about after the second goal went in for Miami. Because the way they killed the game and the way they maintained possession is something that Nashville has been doing to teams this season. And that's something that, Nashville need to improve on. But also, I think part of it is that Nashville just they haven't been in this situation a lot this season. And I think the other thing is that they haven't given away silly goals this season, really. So it kind of, I think, caught people off guard a little bit. And then there is a factor that I don't really want to talk about, but we have to mention, you mentioned it, is that it's Messi. It's, I mean, conceding that free kick isn't a guaranteed goal. But when I saw Messi come up, I was watching the game with a bunch of people and I looked at them and I said, he's going to score this. Because to him, those are like penalties, man. I mean, he scored one just at the Club World Cup just a month ago, and it's really, it's a. I don't want to keep going about this point, but he is really good at soccer, and that was his fifth game with a brace or more in a row in MLS. Okay, like there's an element that's just like this is what Messi does, and this is what that's Messi, and then there's all the other stuff. But we have to mention that. We have to mention. I know people are tired of it, but we have to mention it.
Well, and I do think I do think it's worth noting that while, yes, Miami did do a good job killing off the game, they didn't do quite as good a job at like fully killing it off because Nashville just wasn't clinical enough in the few moments they got. Like, I think
Well,
it's
Nashville should have been
worth
ahead.
remembering. Yeah,
Before
yeah, oh
Miami
yeah,
took the lead. Yeah, like
yeah, yeah.
I think that period. Yeah, but like I'm just
But I
meaning
mean,
like after the second goal. Yeah.
even after the second goal, Hani has one saved. It's a
Hmm.
tight angle, but it's also a goal that we've seen Hani score, maybe 24 times from that angle. Like it is very specifically an area that he likes to score from. There were there were bad decisions being made in the attacking third, basically the whole night, to be fair. Um, I just, Nashville probably didn't deserve to lose that game, but they definitely didn't deserve to win is kind of where I fell on.
I think that's
Like,
fair. Yeah, I think that's fair, and I don't think unless Wednesday and Saturday go terribly wrong, there's there are more evidence to look at this game as a blip rather than a trend, right?
yeah,
The overwhelming majority of evidence say Nashville is a good team that had one bad game or half a bad game. Really, I don't even think it was that bad really from a Nashville
yeah.
perspective. But
It's an away game
that's
in
kind of
Miami in a 2-game week.
yeah.
The
But
we do have to talk about Joe Willis, um, which is unfortunate because we've like just praised him on the show like
last week I think
it was
or
like
2 weeks
a
ago
week
maybe,
ago.
yeah.
Yeah, and I
Well,
think he could have done better on the free kick, but that second goal, I will say, not an easy ball to deal with generally, but he did the hard part and then it messed up the easy part. But is that the biggest blunder? I mean, the only thing that really stands out to even compare it to is the first ever MLS game against Atlanta when he came out like crazy for some reason.
should have been sent off, yeah, and
Yeah.
wasn't somehow. He's had a couple of them throughout the years, but he's not really known for it. He's come close a few times this season,
Yeah.
but he's been able to navigate it well. And we talked about it, and I thought he was having a really good game because those first 20 minutes, Miami tested him and tested the goal a
Yeah.
few times. He had a couple big saves he came up with, and I even tweeted like, "Wow, Joe Willis having a good game," and then he does that, and somebody like replied to my Instagram thing and said, "Well, that didn't age well," and I was like, "Well, he was doing well when I said it. I mean, I can't tell the future, you know, but um, I think he's a professional, and I think he's been around the league so long, and he's been around this team obviously since the start of MLS, and if I was backing anyone to kind of get over it and get it, get that mistake sort of behind him and move on, it would be him. I have zero doubts that he can come back. He's not, I would be more worried if it was one of the younger goalkeepers in the squad. I would be more worried if it was one of the younger players in general that made a mistake that's that big. But for Joe Willis, he's a seasoned professional. He's a veteran for a reason, and he is respected within the locker room and within the Nashville SC fan base. And I've seen a couple of comments that are just kind of like a little out of place for him from fans on social media, but I can guarantee you on Wednesday, if he gets a save or two, the entire fan base will be singing "Joe says no," and it's gonna be fine. Essentially, that's at least my read on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's always tough to be a goalkeeper because when you're excellent, nothing happens. So you only are known by when you're not excellent, and
Yeah,
that's a real tough. I mean, it takes a special kind of mentality to approach it. It's sort of like when a baseball player is successful, they fail 70% of the time. It's a similar sort of concept. Uh, I think there's a couple other guys that are worth talking about. I think the first one, just because it was his return to the starting lineup, is Jacob Schaffelberg. And, it's interesting. We've got a question in the mailbag that's a little bit about this, but, it's really starting to feel like Schaffelberg, he had that little resurgence right before going on international duty. But that spot feels like it's been well and truly claimed at this point by Johnny Perez, and he didn't do. I don't think Schaffberg did anything noteworthy enough to merit a start probably soon. Like I think he's got to really make a statement again to get back into the fold, because Miami is a team that he usually excels against. I mean, it's a slow back line. He's had some great games against Miami, and for the most part, he was pretty anonymous. And so that's a developing thing that I think everybody's going to be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I think sorry, you cut off for a minute there, but I think we got everything in. I think for Schaffelberg it's been, I was talking about the blip versus trend thing. And I can't honestly tell you if his positive moments are a trend or just a couple good things that happened here and there. And his positioning is a little interesting. It's been changing pretty much every season he's been in Nashville. He's had a different position to play. They're all on the wing. They're all using his skill set, but it's a little different now under BJ Callahan and what he's expecting from his wingers. And I just thought the thinking or the idea of getting Schaffelberg in against Miami made sense from a BJ Callahan perspective, because you're expecting there to be space back there, and you're expecting Schaffelberg to run at older Sergio Busquets, I guess, and the Miami defense has been suspect at best, really, this season, not just in the Club World Cup, but even MLS play. And definitely the Champions Cup play, because if you look at that Vancouver game, for example, I mean, it really just went off the rails. But so I thought the selection made sense from BJ. What I kind of didn't expect was maybe Schaffelberg feeling. I did the player ratings for 615soccer.com afterwards, and I think I called it a bit aimless out there. It didn't seem like he had a good sense of what the team is trying to do and what the team is trying to do with him. And maybe that comes from being away with the national team for so long, and also just not playing with this same core of players week in, week out, which Muyl has been, which Johnny Perez has been, which Ahmed Qasim has been. So, I don't want to make this a bigger deal than one off night for a guy, because he could come back and take that spot, because we've seen it happen. Beginning of the year, Ahmed Qasim, that was his spot, and then now we're
it's
saying this
happened
is
this
Johnny's
season.
spot. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if next month it's Schaffelberg's spot. I mean, would you be surprised? He's done that before. He can come in and out. So I'm just kind of reading from one game, but there's a lot more going on to this. But I just think if you ask him right now for that Miami game, he'll be disappointed with his performance, and obviously really bad way to end it all with a injury, or hopefully it's not an injury. So obviously we hope that's not terrible for him. But that kind of just makes it even a worse night for him. I mean, if he's already having an off night and you go off injured, then it's kind of a really disappointing way to mark your return to Nashville SC from the national team.
Yeah, I think we should maybe turn the corner into a bit of positivity here. Obviously, we both kind of think that this is a one-off performance, and in some ways, a loss can help, because it's hard to fully learn lessons when you're winning every week. We see that happen all the time. So maybe a loss kind of resets expectations, resets, the mood in training, especially at a time when you've got guys coming back into the team. It kind of re-energizes going into another 2-game week with another Shield contender. And maybe one of the most important things on the Nashville side of things coming out of that Miami game was that you had Hani Mukhtar being very influential throughout the game and scoring a header, which he does do, but not very often. And I think it's weird, because Nashville's been scoring, goals and goals and goals for fun, but it doesn't feel like Hani's been the one scoring, which is wild, because he scored and I was like, oh yeah, he does that too. He's pretty good at that, actually, more successful than anybody in MLS the last 4 years.
Yeah, he's a goal scorer. The header he scored is like a proper striker header. Man, that was a really good really good header. But he's also
too.
one of those guys who who maybe his numbers have been a little overshadowed by Sam Surridge this year, because Sam Surridge has 16 goals in MLS, and that's worth mentioning. But Hani has double-digit goals now in MLS, and then he has, I think, he has one in the Open Cup, maybe. I don't know. But he has 10 goals in MLS with 8 assists, and that's 18 goal contributions in MLS for Hani Mukhtar. Sam Surridge also has 19 goal contributions, so it's like it's right there, really, when you think about it. It's just we haven't seen as much of Hani scoring the goals, and I think that's that's something Nashville has been building towards for 2 or 3 years now, is having Hani not be the end all when it comes to attacking contributions. When you have Sam Surridge scoring, it takes some of that load off, and then when Hani stops scoring for 2 or 3 games, it's not disaster for Nashville. Matter of fact, they were able to keep the winning streak. So then when Hani's back to scoring ways, he is winning games again, but it's not the whole team is dependent on him. But kudos to him, man, because look, he won MVP, and things haven't been going the best since that trophy, really. I mean, they made the run to the Leagues Cup final, and then everything after that has been a downhill for Nashville SC in general. And I don't think at any point anyone who watches these games can have a comment about the effort that Hani Mukhtar puts into this team and the amount of belief he has in himself and in this team. And I think that's kind of the thing that's been stuck out to me the most, because you know look, we're all human, and if I was him and I'm out here winning MVP while the team is not even making the playoffs, I'm looking to get out. That's personally how I am, and that's why I'm not a professional player, probably. There's a lot of there are a lot of players who wouldn't have this sort of second win, this sort of second resurgence to their career at Nashville again, and continue to be the captain when Walker Zimmerman was out, and continue to score, continue to assist, but also be a leader outside of the scoring and assisting, and helping these younger players come in and adapt. And I think just him doing that is setting a really good example for all these sort of next generation of Nashville SC players that are coming through BJ Callahan's system.
Yeah, and obviously Hani did score the penalty last week. I didn't forget about that, but it was just wild to see him score in a way that we used to see him kind of score freely, kind of getting in space. And he didn't score a ton of headers, but he scored more than you think he did if you go back and watch some highlights. He's pretty good with it. And so kind of moving from that, going back to the U.S. Open Cup, Nashville is in the semifinals of the U.S. Open Cup after a pretty strange day at Geodis Park last Wednesday. I think that's the best way that you could sort of categorize it, because Nashville was down 2-0. Nashville was down 2-0 and never looked like the second best side on the field. I was never really fully worried about them getting back in the game, and I told plenty of people at halftime, two goals is not going to win this game. It was a very strange day to be down 2-0 and still feeling very confident.
Yeah, I don't think you'll get many of those days out at the park, honestly, in any sport, maybe not in any sport, but in any soccer game. It's not a feeling you'll have often, but when your team is on a 14-game winning streak and your striker's leading the league in goals and, all these other factors, you kind of get used to it. And then the other thing is the home factor. It wasn't as big of a crowd as the Philly game, of course, but the fans were still there, and the fans, there weren't these sort of grunts and dissatisfaction wasn't shown really, even when Nashville was 2-0 down. I'm sure there was dissatisfaction on the stands. I'm not saying there wasn't. It just wasn't showed to the team in a unified voice, like we had seen in the past, actually, and that sort of creeping in feeling of is Nashville ever going to be able to overcome this?
This is the nicest thing that I've ever said about this particular team. But there was an air of inevitability. So every 2 months during the Premier League, a certain team in a certain city in England that wears red will be down 2-0 and they're playing like Watford or somebody, and you're not even worried. Like they're going to score like 3 or 4 goals and it'll be finished 4-2 or 5-2 or whatever it'll be. And I hate them with a passion, but that's the way it felt. Like, do you think that that's fair? Like, that is the way that game felt. I was like, it's 2-0, but like, this isn't going to be this way for 90 minutes.
Yeah. And how did Liverpool as the team plays not choosing to recognize, and I respect that. There's only one team in North London, maybe, but I think the way Liverpool came to have that reputation is through constant success first, and second of all is through that stadium that they turned into a fortress. Right, it's one of the best atmospheres in Europe. There's a reason for that, and they're not the only ones with good fans in the Premier League. Don't get me wrong, but there is an aura, if you would, about this team and about that team, and that kind of comes from these runs. It comes from having the MVP, comes from having the league leader in the Golden Boot race. But these things are new to Nashville SC. These accolades and these sort of things aren't something we're used to calling Nashville SC by. To be fair, the last time Nashville SC went on a run similar to this was when they didn't lose a single home game in 2021. And Nissan Stadium was starting to feel like that. I don't know if you remember, Clay. And I mean, it was a little less exciting because there wasn't as many wins, but like Nissan Stadium was starting to feel like
2 games.
Yeah. I mean, the idea was like nobody wanted to come to Nissan Stadium within the league, especially not for a playoff match or anything like that. It's so that obviously died down. And since opening Geodis, we've talked about how Geodis has failed to failed is a strong word. It hasn't succeeded as much as it can be to be that fortress. And that happens with teams opening new stadiums all the time. Look, I'm an Arsenal fan. When the Emirates opened up, till this day, people talk about how it hasn't been able to replace Highbury. And that's 100+ year. And that's happening with Clay's team this season. So that's gonna be, but that's 100-year plus tradition. So let alone something that's not even as long and maybe not as established. Obviously, you go through these sort of ups and downs, but not to get on a whole tangent about Geodis Park, but the fans played their part against DC. The atmosphere, and then also the belief that players had, because now they have done this multiple times. They know that they're playing at home, and eyes are on them, and there's an expectation of them to win. And as soon as that like Johnny Perez goal came in, you were just like, all right, I think Nashville can pull this off. And then, maybe it didn't happen in the first half, which was a little frustrating. But, man, once the tying goal went in, you knew for a fact. Fact. Everybody watching that game, including DC, knew for a fact there was no way out for DC at that point.
Now, obviously I'm not comparing the quality of an MLS team to a Premier League team in this. It's just that's the inevitability that I felt. And towards the end of the first half, now I will agree with Valair that he didn't have a good game, and this is Gaston Brugman who I'm talking about. But there was like a patch of about 5 or 6 minutes where the pressure was relentless from Nashville. Normally when we're talking about pressure, we're talking about press and like forcing turnovers. I don't mean that in this way. I mean like Nashville was in the attacking third and it was just, that didn't work. Well, let me just cycle it to this guy and see if it works over there. And it just felt like wave after wave after wave. And I couldn't believe Nashville didn't score a second goal to end the half because that's how like inevitable it felt. And then honestly, kind of lucky for DC that it was only 5. Like, they really turned on the Jets. It was almost a Chicago situation.
Yeah, I mean the confidence built after every goal was felt. Like, I don't know if Andy Nahar like takes that shot and scores it in that way. If it, not just that night, but just overall, his season has been really good. He has confidence clearly. So I think. If we just go and talk about Andy Nahar for a second, I know this is like the 5th time we're doing this on this show, but that man is an all-star for a reason, man. He's the best right back in the league. And the only competition he had in the league was Freeman, who went on international duty and hasn't played in MLS for a minute. And you kind of just realize that there's no one else coming near this guy in the entire league. And as good as Surge has been, as good as Mukhtar has been, I think you can make an argument for other strikers and other number 10s or whatever. You can't make an argument for another right back in the league other than Andy Nahar. And that is one of the biggest compliments to Andy Nahar himself, but also to Nashville SC and BJ Callahan.
We've said since the first month of the season that Andy Nahar might be in the running for player of the season. Surge is, tied for leading the Golden Boot race. Hani Mukhtar is having like a vintage Hani Mukhtar season. I think you can still make the argument that Andy Nahar should still be the player of the season. That's how good he's been. Like, he won't be. I mean, it just doesn't work for defenders that way. But, like, that's how good he's been, especially in comparison to everyone else. I will say I did feel like that goal was coming. DC just kept having weak clearances to the top of the box. I'm like, somebody is going to score from there. This can't keep happening with nobody getting a shot off. One of the things I want to talk about.
Sorry, how did you feel about Nahar playing in that winger spot the last few minutes against Miami? I know we talked about Miami already, but what did you feel about that?
You can't get the ball to Surge against Miami. Surge had so few touches.
14.
And Nahar was having a great game. Hani Mukhtar was finding space on that side of the field. And I can understand, like, I'm always hesitant to move guys up the field because I see it not work so often. Nahar has played in that role in his career plenty of times. It's not where he's most comfortable, but given the way that he was playing against Miami, given the way that he has played this season, and given that you can't get the ball to the leading scorer in the league in that game, the fewest touches, the 18 the whole season, having more options there, because Nahar can score, Hani can score, Nahar can deliver a good ball to either of them. Getting him further up the field when you're chasing a goal. I mean, I would prefer it not happen very often, but it made sense in the context of the game.
Yeah, that's fair. And to me, like he is dangerous. He's the most dangerous because he's a right back. You know what I mean? Because you don't expect a right back to do all this work, which leaves an extra option higher up the pitch. And I think
he does cut in more than a traditional right back, though. So he does fill into a similar role at times, even playing as a right back.
Yeah. And I just think when you put him higher up the pitch, maybe you lose a little bit of that connectivity he has with the winger, with Hani Mukhtar, who drops in deeper with whether it's Brugman or whoever's out there, on the right side. And I think it's a working combo. I appreciate BJ trying something, especially with Johnny Perez not available, because I don't think we would see it if Johnny Perez was available. But at some point you just gotta throw the kitchen sink, right, and see what happens. Yeah. And Nashville tried to do that and create some chaos, maybe, but again, Miami kind of came up with that. Sorry, I know we had moved to the DC game, but I just remembered that, and I was like,
I do want to talk about one more thing from the DC game, is because we kind of lightly joked about it. How serious is Nashville going to take this? And this is the first time, like, that when that lineup was announced for the DC game, it was the first time I actually thought Nashville was taking the Open Cup seriously. Because, I mean, Valair and I had a very interesting phone call when the Orlando lineup dropped. For the round prior, and they have reasons that they gave for the lineup being what it was in Orlando, and whatever that may be. But it was like, I saw the lineup and was like, oh, this is a real team to go out. Not that the backups wouldn't be a real team, but very little turnover compared to what we expected going into the game, which may have cost Nashville against Miami. That is an expectation of things that can happen, but it made me immediately very excited, not only for what was going to happen in the DC game, but what could happen in the next game. And the potential for a trophy going up.
And I said this on my player ratings when I was kind of rating BJ Callahan, I guess, and I said, look, he's practicing what he preached. He's been preaching that he takes the Open Cup seriously, and seeing it on the field is, every manager, if you ask them, will you take this competition seriously? Of course they're going to say yes, because what are they going to say? No, like that's not going to happen. Unless you're Bruce Arena and you send your assistant to a Champions League game because you don't believe in that. But anyway,
we still stand Bruce Arena on this show.
Absolutely. I mean, anybody who knows me would know this. But yeah, I mean, look, he stuck to his guns and he played the big guys, and the big guys delivered, and that's really what this came down to. Even if he didn't start with a stronger of a lineup, if DC went 2-0 up, I feel like we would have seen a stronger lineup anyway. But that's, I think you put down in the rundown, Clay, it's a statement of intent, and that's what that felt like. Not just the win in itself, but BJ Callahan saying, "No, we're gonna play with our starters. This is a real thing." And look, it paid dividends. Now they are 2 wins away from the first ever trophy. So it's gonna be an important match, whether it's Philadelphia at Geodis or Red Bulls in New Jersey. It's gonna be probably the biggest match Nashville SC has played since the Leagues Cup final. And that's not exaggerating. That's just because the nature of the competition puts you in a win and you're through to the final of the U.S. Open Cup and your second final ever in club history, and a loss will just your journey's over. So it's a very high stakes competition game. It's not happening for another month, so we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on it. But the game is not happening for another 2 months. The game deciding which of those two will face Nashville SC is happening in a month. So there's still a lot of time there. And then after the semifinal in September, I think the finals in October. So there's still a lot of time to go.
So it's a question that is almost played out to ask, but you may as well ask it. Which would you prefer, Philly at home or away to New York?
I think last week I said away to New York, and now I'm changing my answer. I think Nashville SC has built something at home based on that Philly match. And as a team that's on a run or having a season that's the same that's Nashville SC's having right now, I just think you want as many home games as possible. And I think you want to showcase your style, your superiority to your fans as much as possible. And hosting a semifinal at a stadium that you built, specifically for this team, I think says a big. It's really the biggest event for soccer events since the Leagues Cup final, which Nashville SC also hosted. Those are big things for the stadium in itself.
Well, and I think I was kind of New York away last week as well, but like now that I'm along the same lines, but not just because it's a big event to host, NSC. Like the last Philly game really felt like the first time where like it broke through mainstream sports media. You got to think about the whole season. Now, it's very hard to beat a team 3 times in 1 year. It is. It really is, especially a team as good as Philly. But if Nashville were to host Philly and then beat Philly again to go to a final and then play Philly again in the playoffs, like there's going to be an edge mentally. It's just the way it's going to be. It's like Nashville missing its first ever 7 penalties in MLS, or in penalty shootouts. It's one of those things where it's like they just got our number, man. Like it just is what it is. Mm-hmm. I think that it gives a real edge on the potential outcome if Nashville were to win. I think the outcome is worth the sort of risk there. It would be great.
And players care about that because players remember these things. And like Hani Mukhtar mentioned the playoff game against Philly in 2022 unprompted when we asked him about the penalty against Blake. These players remember that. And I've heard throughout the years, whether it's at the training ground or press conferences or whatever, players mention that game who were playing in that game. And, and that stuff gets contagious too around the locker room because even if you're not there, somebody's catching you up on the history, right? Somebody's telling you, hey, this happened to us there. And, I mean, I know BJ Callahan tries to talk it down often, and I would too if I was the manager of the team. But these are real things and feelings, and players, care about this.
Well, and Callahan, I mean, that's a guy who was at Philly working for a coach who got fired despite being a very successful coach at Philly.
Yep.
You know that game carries a little bit of personal significance to him as well. So it is interesting. I'm that's the thing about the Open Cup is you play so many games so quickly, and then you just sit and wait and wait and wait for the end of the Open Cup when all you really want to do is see it all the way through. It's sort of like the FA Cup in that way as well, where it's just like, they made it. I can't get excited for 2 months now.
Well, that's enough about a game that potentially might happen, I guess.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so just before we move on, worth noting on the other side of the bracket, which if Nashville makes the final, they will play away to either Austin or Minneapolis. And hopefully they make it, and hopefully Farmer Soccer's there to watch it live so it can be a scoreless draw.
Yeah, I am, I am more, well, I don't know how October is in Minneapolis, but if I had my choice there, I've been to Austin twice. It didn't really intrigue me. I don't get the hype. They do have very good barbecue, I will have to say. But as a city, and since I am kind of committed to going to this game, I would rather go to Minneapolis again and give it another shot rather than give Austin a third shot, because I just didn't have that much fun in their city.
The most important thing is whoever wins the Open Cup is a first-time winner. The part of the reasoning for that is lame, which is that the whole league didn't participate in the Open Cup, but it is still a good thing. It's the most historic trophy in the sport in the United States, and Nashville's 2 wins away from it. So that's enough for that for now. We'll talk about the Open Cup again in September. Unfortunately, we got to wait that long. But you don't have to wait long for our third segment, as we will be back here in just a moment to talk about. We've got a couple of reviews. We've got some mailbag questions, and it's another 2-match week, and we're going to preview those games up next on Pharmaceutical Soccer. Welcome back to Pharma Soccer. Clay Trainum and Valair Shabilla here. Please remember to follow us at Pharma Soccer on all the socials. You can also check out pharmasoccer.com to get you some Pharma Soccer gear. My Pharmaceutical Soccer t-shirt is still undefeated, I would like to point out. And check out 615 Soccer. They do good stuff over there. And by they, I mean Valair. Valair does good stuff over there, and you should definitely check him out at 615 Soccer, as well as Ben Wright and Ronan Briscoe and Jeff Remlinger. We got a whole staff over there. They just finished a sort of wrap up on what the Academy season was like. So find out about the Nashville Stars of tomorrow at 615soccer.com.
Also, shout out to the photographers, Christina and Mike.
Absolutely.
Both of them. Incredible pictures. And Joel, who went to Miami. Joel, the producer of this show, one of the producers of this show, also went to Miami and took some pictures of Nashville's game there. So really cool stuff happening at 615soccer.com.
Yeah. So as we do every week, if you leave us a 5-star review, we are going to read that 5-star review right here. It has to be a 5-star review. Otherwise, we will not read it. So please review us on Apple Podcasts. Leave a comment on Spotify. This 5-star review was left by Shaffle Daddy.
What did he say?
Well, so he gave the title of his comment was Shaffle Daddy, and the body of his comment was Shaffle Daddy. So Shaffle Daddy said under Shaffle Daddy, and that is your review, 5-star review. That it can be that simple. If you leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, we will read it. So thank you, Shaffle Daddy.
What are the chances this is Jacob Schaffelberg's father? And because everybody calls Schaffelberg Shaffle Baby, thus making him Shaffle Daddy. Am I overthinking this?
For those that have, that my wife is all over all of the NSC Instagram, like players' Instagrams. They would know that Schaffelberg does have a baby. So he went from Shaffle Baby to Shaffle Daddy. So it could, in fact, be Jacob Schaffelberg.
Wow. I take back everything
So,
I said in the second segment. No, I'm just kidding.
because that would
Well,
make
shout
his
out
dad
Capo
now, I
Daddy.
guess, Shaffle granddaddy.
Yeah. Also, I need more reviews to come through. So if you would
Yeah.
like to be anything to be read out, well, within reason, anything to be read out loud on the show, please put a 5-star review on Apple. But you can also do Spotify. You can comment on Spotify, and if you join the 615 Soccer paid membership, you get access to the Discord where you have direct access to us. And then if you are a Kappa member within that Discord, which means you pay us $7 a month, that's it. You have an opportunity for really cool things like not only asking our show questions, but maybe even asking some NSC players questions. So make sure to check that out if you don't already. Clay, is that good enough segue for you?
Yeah. So we've got two questions with varying levels of importance. The first one comes from Eskil Music, who says, with the transfer window coming up soon, what are the chances that NSC makes any moves? Should they be making any moves, and what would they be? Now, I think the first and most obvious one here is that there are some decisions to be made on Johnny Perez, but given the room that LA Galaxy does not currently have with a frankly terrible season that they're having, that's kind of a moot point. I think it's fair to say that Perez is probably with Nashville for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of the situation, and I I struggle to see really like a good point about why Perez shouldn't be kept at Nashville even past this season. I think he provides a lot of even if it's not starting minutes, cover minutes, but as we've seen, he's capable of starting as well. He's a very good player who has a lot of potential as well and can learn. I think Ben Wright pointed this out, but if he does sign before his birthday, he could still be a U22 initiative, which would really help with the roster structure, which will really help with the cap that Nashville SC has. His birthday's coming up later in the year. He's not currently on a U22 initiative contract, so that's just something to keep in mind. I don't know if Nashville SC is even eyeing him for something like that, or just want to give him a senior spot right away. But the matter of the fact is that they need to figure out something with the LA Galaxy. Now they do have a buy option, and the Galaxy can recall him. These two things are happening. So Nashville SC has the buy option. Galaxy can recall him from his loan anytime after the summer. I don't know if either of those two is going to happen, but Nashville SC can also go to the Galaxy with a new offer. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that since this deal happened, a big change within the MLS roster rules or MLS transfer rules happened, which now now MLS allows for transfer offers to be done through cash. So you don't have to use league money like GAM or TAM or anything along those lines. And you also don't have to use other players or other assets. You can use cash to transfer players from one team to another within MLS. And I think that might come in play, all things considered, here for Johnny Perez. But a lot's still up in the air. A lot of the details aren't clear yet. But I think if I'm Nashville SC, I would be looking to keep him long term as hard as possible.
And just for, I know that we talk about this a lot when it comes to transfers within the league. The difference between cash and general allocation money, or allocation money in general, is allocation money is essentially monopoly money, and the best usage of allocation money is buying down players who are over budget. So, like,
Yep.
if you are in excess of the salary cap, you can say that this 500,000, player is only going to count as like a 400,000 budget charge or something like that. I'm using round numbers. It's more complicated than that, but like that is the purpose of it. So a straight cash transfer basically takes that out of it, but you still have to figure out within the roster construction. So allocation money is generally considered worth more than cash. but no one's been ever really able to tack on what that number actually is. So like it's an interesting thing that Nashville is. I mean, it's something that Mike Jacobs has made a living off of, honestly, working in these Gam and Tam deals. But I what it all boils down to is it seems unlikely that he'll be going back to LA this season. It seems pretty possible that he'll go back at the end of the season, but I think Nashville is going to really pull out the stops to try and make sure that he's there. And if they can get it figured out and have him as a U22 player, that's Nashville once again maximizing a U22 spot on a guy near the end. Now, a lot of people may feel a certain way about that because it's not really designed for those players. On the other hand, it does mean you're getting a more mature player on a budget-friendlier contract. So, like, maybe it's less of a gamble on a 22-year-old than a 19-year-old because you're going to have a more mature technical player. So it's kind of the way that you look at it. And that would be Nashville once again using that rule kind of in the gray area to maximize it.
Yeah, other than Johnny Perez, I agree with you that that is probably the priority. Other than him, I would say that if you're not planning on doing a U22 initiative for Johnny Perez, that would be the only sort of move I would make this summer if I was Nashville SC. Maybe bringing a U22 initiative striker to maybe carry the load a little bit with Sam Surratt. Chances are Teal Bunbury is not returning next year. You want to integrate this player into the squad a little bit. You want to integrate them into the squad before you need them to produce, which would be next season. So that would be another thing to look at. Left back is an interesting one because you have obviously Daniel Lovitz, who's kind of locked it in, but Tate Schmidt, Taylor Washington, both of whom are injured at the moment, unfortunately. But you would think one of them at least coming back would kind of cover for that backup spot. But I don't see any other glaring needs other than those few. I do think there are a lot of contractual things, which is underrated or maybe a part of the window that doesn't get discussed as much. These contracts, these talks with players is probably ongoing for a while. You know, whether we mentioned earlier, Andy Nahar, he's probably going to be asking for a new contract, deservedly so. Walker Zimmerman's DP contract's about to run out. What's going to happen there? There's a couple other contract talks like that going on probably right now, and I would place the priority on that before integrating any new players into the squad.
Okay, so that was like a real question. So shout out to Eskil Music. This is a real question, but it's much less important, I think. And it comes from Fusic. And you know what? If you put questions in the mailbag, for the most part, we're going to try and answer them. And so I think I'm saying how he wants that pronounced, Fusic. Right. He goes, here's a stupid question. So he does own that at the front. What's up with Sam rolling/tucking up one of the legs of his shorts? It's almost always one side, making your striking leg more aerodynamic? Question mark. Works out that side more and wants to show off more muscles. Sun hits that leg more and needs to cool it off. Now, Valair, your favorite ever player had the same tactic at times with the rolled up shorts. So I'm going to let you take the first stab at this.
Not only him, but it was like a thing like that started happening. Like Alexis Sanchez did it for a while with Nash. It would be really cool if we could have Alexis Sanchez playing in Nashville.
Imagine if Henry played for Nashville.
Yeah, that'd be crazy. But yeah, Thierry Henry, I think, did it a little bit. He was more known for his over the knees socks. That was kind of like his thing. Now he did do the little roll up of the shorts, but I've seen a lot of high profile players do it.
Nobody
I am
more
not going to try
high profile than Kosuke Kimura.
Kosuke Kimura did it, yeah. I'm not going to try to answer this in any way, shape, or form. No, I'm not going to answer this in any serious way because I don't know. I think it feels cool. One time I tried it when I was playing soccer, just because some of my favorite players did it, and I was like, I want to know what that feels. And it felt cool. I don't know. I wanted to do it more. You know, it's like kind of like cutting your socks at the back. Like all these young players started doing it, and then like now, like my nephew does it in his like soccer games. it feels cool. Sometimes it's really hot in Tennessee. You know, you wanna get a little bit more breathable sort of situation going on. I have to admit I haven't seen Sam Surridge do this, so I just haven't noticed it. Have you noticed it?
No, but for me, it would be a real issue. It just seems like a real chafing concern for me. So
Mm,
you'll never see me wear the shorts that way. But hey, if you got it, flaunt it. I mean, sure.
yeah, look, if it helps get you 16 goals a season, keep doing it. That would be my
Yeah.
advice.
So our official answer on this is it makes him aerodynamic and more likely to score goals.
100%.
Yeah. Okay.
Scientifically. Yeah.
So this show's going a little long already, so we are gonna go ahead and get into the week at hand. Now it's Columbus and Toronto this week. Columbus on Wednesday, Toronto on Saturday, both at home. Um, the most important question to you, Valair, as someone who is an MLS old timer, do you remember when Columbus and Toronto were technically rivals?
No, I don't think so.
They
Uh,
played for a traveling trophy. This was whenever
I've
there
heard
were all
about
these
this.
stupid trophies. They were in the Trillium Cup.
Mm,
Uh,
mm,
that's like the Chicago Fire have the Brimstone Cup with the Dallas Burn because they're both hot, you know.
right,
Anyway, so this is
right.
the Trillium Cup week for Nashville, and that they're playing Columbus and Toronto. One of those teams is a lot better than the other. So I guess we should start with Columbus. This is it's a Shield 6-pointer. That's what it is right now.
Yeah, no other way of talking about it. This is the third MLS game in a row for Nashville SC where it seems like they can make huge strides in their supporter shield, um, pursuing the supporter shield. There was that DC game in between Philly and Miami, but Philly win, Miami loss, and now again back home for Columbus, and I think that's going to be, I love seeing Wilfred Nancy teams play. They play really nice soccer, really beautiful soccer. I love seeing the Columbus Crew play specifically because even without Cucho Hernandez, who was obviously, the second best player other than Messi last year, I think in this league. Um, they are still very, very fun team, and I think BJ Callahan is going against a guy who he likes a lot. He's been very nice about in public and in sort of in interviews and stuff. But also, I think it's another measuring stick, right? It's another way for Nashville SC to measure where they are and if this project has reached that level. I think it's going to be a little different than Philadelphia because I think Columbus gives you more, um, more opportunities to break and more opportunities to transition. But at the same time, they are a little more deadly in attack, I think, than when Nashville played Philadelphia. Because when Nashville played Philadelphia, Ty Berube was just coming back and things were a little different. So, um, that said, they still don't have a striker who is kind of like, a Sam Surridge type, which they're looking for one, and they're in the transfer window for one. But until then, they're just kind of gonna pass it around you and try to make really good direct runs towards your goal and try to score. So it should be a really fun game. I think it's the highlight probably of that Wednesday night slate. And I think a lot of people will have their eyes on that game, just like the Philadelphia one and the Miami one.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting Columbus coming off a very interesting game in a rivalry game at that in Cincinnati where they were down 2-0 in the first 5 minutes and won 4-2. That's Columbus is good. It's always a tough battle, but it's also a game that Nashville's typically played pretty well against Columbus over the years. They haven't necessarily won, but they've played well, and I think it'll be where Nashville is going from that loss in Miami. I think we're going to learn a lot in this Columbus match. I really do. The last time that Nashville lost 2 consecutive games was actually earlier this season. I looked it up because it doesn't feel like it happened this season, but it happened against Cincy and Charlotte, which may as well have been a lifetime ago in terms of the way that Nashville has been playing ever since. And so 2 games that Nashville also had a chance to not lose. But I do think that there's going to be quite a response. I don't know that it's going to be like the 7-2 response against the Chicago Fire, but I think it's going to be quite a response this week against Columbus. And I feel pretty good about Nashville's chances in the game, honestly.
I don't know if you're a huge believer of patterns, but here are the last 4 games between these two teams, Columbus and Nashville, starting with the furthest one from current day. 2-0 win to Columbus Crew, followed by a 2-2 draw, followed by a 2-0 Columbus Crew win, followed by a 2-2 draw. Is it going to be a 2-0 Columbus Crew win? Or maybe Nashville gets a 2-0 win? I don't know. I think I'm going to predict a 2-0 win regardless, because patterns are fun. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Now, on the other end of the table, Nashville is going this weekend it's going to host this weekend against Toronto, and this like buzzsaw of teams that Nashville has played into the league. It's a brief reprieve against Toronto. I mean, Toronto's been, one of the worst teams in the league the last few years. So you hope this is a game that Nashville comes out and really just grabs by the scruff of the neck and just takes control. But, again, we've said that about other opponents this season as well. It is MLS. Weird stuff happens in MLS.
They are unbeaten and 1. When they go to San Diego away on Wednesday, so they might be unbeaten and 0 by the time they come to Nashville. That's my analysis. You don't get any more. We're running out of time.
All right. So that aside, what are you going plugs and predictions this week?
All right. Let's do a 2-0 Nashville SC win against Columbus. I told you I'm going to do that. With goals from Hani Mukhtar and Sam Surridge. He gets back to scoring ways. 2 whole games without a goal. It's crazy. And then for the Toronto game, I'm going to go for a 1-0 win for Nashville SC. Very frustrating 1-0 win, but Sam Surridge scores a penalty and seals it there. And then please go to 615soccer.com for the latest of Nashville SC, but also follow me at Valair Shabilla, because boy, do I have a lot of things going on, and I think you'll like most things that are going on. So follow along, 615soccer.com, and at Valair Shabilla on socials.
Yeah. As for me, you can follow me at Clay La Soul on Instagram and Twitter. Instagram has very little soccer talk. Twitter, almost exclusively soccer. Well, a lot of soccer talk. And so as for Columbus, I think Nashville gets an early lead, and Columbus makes sure that it doesn't make sure that they keep themselves in the race, and we end up seeing a 2-2 draw. I'm going to go 2-2 draw, but then I think Toronto's going to get ugly. I'm going to go 4-1 against Toronto at the weekend. I think coming off going 15 unbeaten, then 2 without a win, Nashville gives up an early goal against Toronto, and it becomes the DC game. And it is pick however many goals you want to win by, and that's what you win by. That's what I'm going with. So those are our predictions. Steven sent in his predictions before he decided not to show up. He predicted a 3-0 loss to Columbus, and he's really, really down on Nashville. That's the way he just rides the wave. He actually thinks we're going to lose to he thinks Nashville's going to lose to Toronto 5-1.
Yeah, with a hat trick
by unrealistic person.
Yeah, he also thinks that Lorenzo Insigne will score a hat trick by signing a 1-day contract back with Toronto. That's Steven's prediction right there.
Yeah. So that's what he believes. That's what he told us he believes. And if he has a problem with us saying it, he could have been on the show. Anyway, You'll hear him next week, presumably, as he gloats about a team that shall not be named. And that'll wrap it up here for Farm and Soccer this week. We hope to see you next week. Thanks for listening.